the Sword of Mercury. So today we have a more, a little bit away from our normal topics of like discussing science and whatnot. Today is more discussing film, and we're talking about Star Wars, which of course has a lot of connection to some of the stuff we talk about, but I'm more addressing today the stuff around pop culture ties, especially here in the 21st century. And ironically, the title of this video is Star Wars is for Psychos. And the reason why I titled the video this, we're gonna find out. So maybe without further ado, let's get into it. So, if you're familiar with the Star Wars prequels, then you might have a hint of all of this stuff on the board, especially with the relationship between Anakin and Padmé. So, of course, as we know, a spoiler alert for any of you that haven't watched it, Anakin is initially a slave, and he grows up on Tatooine, and he meets Padmé, and essentially when he leaves, they grow up essentially in different parts of like Coruscant, like the Jedi capital, basically, and they have different distinct roles where Anakin goes off to be a Jedi and she becomes a senator. She goes from being a queen to being a senator. So they both have like duties, which like leads to this like aspect of intimacy and secrecy around their relationship, which adds to kind of this like passion aspect. And the Jedi are not supposed to like form connections or attachments to people in like deep emotional form, right? But in any case, Anakin and Padmé decide to have this like secret relationship, which we see in like episode 2. And it's kind of funny because Anakin, she's older than him, so she always has seen him like as this like almost like younger boy or little boy, like, and she even says like, oh, you'll always be that little boy I knew on Tatooine, when she sees him again. And it's so funny because in that episode, she says that, or she seems to like not be too excited that he's there to protect her from Anakin's perspective. And Anakin's like, oh yeah, she barely even like noticed me or whatever. And like Jar Jar and Obi-Wan are essentially like, she was actually really excited to see us. That's like happier than like we've seen her in a long time. And Obi-Wan tells Anakin, be mindful of your feelings. She was happy to see us. So, in any case, then of course, as we know, the storyline progresses, and they go off to Naboo and whatnot. And then, they have the whole Tatooine arc where Anakin goes to try and save his mom, but he's kind of too late to save her. And then he ends up like killing all the sand people and coming back and telling Padmé, I killed all of them. I killed every last one of them. They were animals, so I slaughtered them like animals. And, in terms of like the kind of psychopathic aspect that plays into the Star Wars prequels, this probably should have been a yellow flag going up, or at least a yellow at the time, going up to Padmé that, oh yeah, shit, I would say he's off his rocker, but, there's some extreme, deep-rooted, lack of, emotional balance here when it comes to people close to him, which is something that a Jedi is supposed to not have. They're not supposed to have deep emotional attachments that cause this emotional turbulence and cause them to, tap into the dark side and whatnot. So anyway, but the opposite happens. She ends up like getting closer to him and closer, and they end up going to Geonosis to try and save Obi-Wan, and when they get there and they get captured, shows like this longing for each other that they both have, which is like the whole speech that is given when, you know, Padme is wearing like the black leather outfit that we see in episode 2. That's very famous for the scene where, you know, it's like, what's the meme go? Anakin, we can't be together, but it's like the outfit that she chooses for that conversation. So, I don't know, it seems like very BDSM almost to me. So, or like, you know, a little bit of, maybe kinky MDLP concerning that, you know, Anakin is, has very close ties to, that mother aspect. You know, we even see that portrayed even in episode 1 where, like, when they're first taking off on the spaceship, and like obviously like Anakin's just this little boy on the spaceship, like, you know, Padme comes to, you know, put the blanket around him when he's cold in space and kind of take care of him and stuff like this. So she's always been this kind of like older, caring figure for him, but also somebody who likes to always do things her own way and exercise her independence and stuff. So very much that M in the MDLB aspect. And if you don't know what that is, I'll leave that to you guys to go and search out, but very reflective of 21st century culture at this point in time. So we can see why it's gonna make Star Wars saga is kind of making a comeback, especially with the prequels and episode 2 and episode 3. So, but I think that kind of concept around these themes is maybe a little bit overlooked in terms of putting the pieces together. So, of course, they form this deep attachment for each other, in which, you know, Anakin's pretty much, you know, he's already coming over to the dark side because, you know, he's forming that deep attachment to her, and, you know, this deep emotional connection that is encompassed in this type of relationship here. So, and, you know, who can blame him? He's down bad, you know? He's down bad at this point for Padme. So, you know, you can't really blame him for, almost turning to the dark side, but in any case, and we can kind of see how, like, some of this plays out here in the saga, where, you know, the dark side is like this intense deep riz where Anakin's giving the speech to Padme about how he needs her and whatnot, and she basically reciprocates those feelings near the end of episode 2. So attachment, light size detachment, and Obi-Wan is this almost like older, like, father figure / brother figure, like older brother figure, who has this almost like neutral riz about him, where he's not necessarily rizzing anybody, but he has this almost like essence about his aura that it's just like naturally vibing with other people, right? And it almost builds this attraction on its own, right? If you're into like Star Wars, the Clone Wars, or whatever, you know that he also had an emotional attachment with like the Duchess of what's it called? Name of the planet's skipping my mind. In any case, like Duchess Satine or whatever her name is, of whatever the planet is. So, in any case, like, Obi-Wan is, like, familiar with, like, this kind of attachment, really, and he's the only really other Jedi who had experience similar to, you know, what Anakin has for Padme, so I think that's why he kind of doesn't harp on him too much about having these feelings and whatnot, because he understands it is natural, and he even says that it is natural for us to, like, have these feelings, for people, right? So, but in essence, moving on, so Anakin's down bad for this type of relationship, this intense riz. So, you know, Padme's got her whole leather thing going on. She's older, she's domineering in this, like, almost independent societal context where where she likes to do things her own way. She doesn't particularly like to be told what to do. She's kind of like the woman with the plan, and she takes action on it. You know, you can even see that when they get captured and they're in the arena, and like Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padmé are like tied up, and Anakin's talking to Obi-Wan about like, what are we gonna do here, and he's just like, stay calm, we'll think of something, and Anakin's like, what about Padmé? And Obi-Wan looks over and sees her climbing up the pole, and he's like, she seems to be on top of things, right? So she's very much like that, take action, not necessarily waiting for a knight in shining armor to come save her. Like, she's capable of like exercising her own independence as well, right? So anyway, he's down bad, and this kind of leads into this turn to the dark side, where he ends up, well, he doesn't actually kill her, but he ends up breaking her heart, and that is what ends up killing her. But essentially, in episode 3, he becomes really obsessed about, okay, how are we gonna keep her safe from this vision that I've had? And Master Yoda tells him, always in motion the future is. Fear of loss is a path to the dark side and whatnot. And Anakin, like, he's not receptive to any of that. He's just like, oh, what the hell are we gonna do here? We gotta find a way to keep her alive. And it seems like, to him, from his perspective, that Palpatine is the only one being receptive to kind of what he's going through, even though he does, straight up tell him, oh yeah, basically I'm a Sith Lord, and this is the only way you can save her or whatever. So essentially Palpatine's like manipulating him to, with this ability to save Padmé, right? In any case, this essentially ends up like playing on his emotions, which leads to this turn to the dark side, because he gives in to those emotions of fear and of attachment, and that ends up what leads him to losing her, because if he almost stuck to the Jedi code of keeping that sense of detachment and that sense of being able to discern like your own emotions, and even remembering like what Obi-Wan told him in episode 2, be mindful of your feelings, Anakin, they betray you. So, and the reason why he tells him that is because Anakin feels like Padmé is not happy to see him, but Obi-Wan tells him that's not the case. If you're mindful of your feelings, you would have sensed that she is happy to see us, even though she has a lot going on, basically. In any case, so Palpatine pretty much leverages this to assist his greater plan, right? And turn him to the dark side so he can become his new apprentice. So, and then, Anakin hears this message in his head when Mace Windu and the rest of the other Jedi, who are pretty much useless in that fight, go off to confront the Chancellor. He hears Palpatine's voice in his head saying that, if the Jedi destroy me, that any chance of saving her will be lost. And, he senses Padmé from across, the city, from across Coruscant. She's in her quarters, and he's in the Jedi Temple, and they're almost sensing each other through the Force. And, he's hearing this voice in his head from Palpatine, or by Palpatine, or whatever, and it's, he gives into that, his emotions, and goes off to try to intervene, right, or to ensure that Palpatine is taken alive, right? In essence, he plays into that scenario of fear that is clouding his judgment. So, in essence, that is kind of what's going on, and then he gives into that, and he turns to the dark side, and he lets that be almost a aspect of a aspect that is able to manipulate him into following the plans of Palpatine, or of the Emperor. And he turns to the dark side. He does all these things. He, slaughters a Jedi in the temple. He kills the younglings. He, launches a full-out assault against the Jedi, and believes that he creates his narrative in his head based on his emotions being out of balance, that, the Jedi are keeping him from achieving his true potential. And I think part of that is true, where the Jedi were not giving him the full rank that he deserved to become a master and be accepted on the council. And Palpatine utilizes this as an advantage by putting him into situations where the Jedi were almost forced into saying that, the council elects his own members, so the chancellor is not going to be able to make you a master or whatever, even if they feel like that's how it should be, right? So, and even Obi-Wan starts to kind of see that, the council is doing some kind of shady stuff in terms of not putting Anakin on the council, asking him to spy on the Chancellor, putting him in all these, very volatile situations without fully trusting him, especially since he is the chosen one, and he is the one meant to bring balance to the Force, but they're kind of denying him that potential, or that trust that he should be given, seeing as, among all the Jedi Council, he was one of the only Jedi that has faced a Sith Lord and killed him, or faced a Sith in general, because, none of the other Jedi on the Council had faced any Sith up until that point. Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda and maybe Windu were the only ones on the whole Council who had faced Sith at that time, So, and I think it was only really Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. I don't think Windu had faced a Sith until Episode 3, where he confronted Palpatine. But by that point, Anakin and Obi-Wan had already faced Dooku multiple times. So, in any case, Obi-Wan had faced Maul on Naboo and whatnot, and Anakin was even there, and, he resulted in kind of the victory of that day by destroying the droid battleship, or the droid control ship, or whatever. So they were both basically esteemed war heroes, and none of the other Jedi on the Council had even reached that level of accomplishment, but they still continued to deny him the rank because he was the youngest Jedi to be on the Council at that point, or to be even, admitted before the Jedi Council as a knight, or of that status at the time, because not only was he one of the youngest Jedi to be on the Council, but he was also the oldest Jedi to be trained by the Jedi. So there was some slight bending of the Jedi rules, based on this, him being the chosen one. And the Jedi had become kind of too rigid in their thinking, and even Yoda came to see that the Jedi had become arrogant in their ways. And, the Emperor Palpatine, he played on this, and he even tells Yoda, the Jedi have become arrogant, or you've become arrogant. Yoda realized that Jedi had become arrogant, and even says that in, I think, Episode 2, that that's a flaw that had become more common among Jedi, that they've become arrogant and short-sighted, and that allowed the dark side to actually cloud a lot of their judgment, because they didn't believe that the Sith can go undetected, be right under their nose. They thought they would be able to sense it, but of course we know that the Chancellor was using the dark side of the Force to cloud their vision. So, and Dooku tells him this, and Obi-Wan, he wasn't hearing that in Episode 2. So the Jedi had kind of become arrogant, and Anakin started to see this, but he took it way too extremely, where it was, telling Obi-Wan, the Jedi are evil, and they're the ones standing in the way of peace. They're the ones trying to overthrow the Republic. So he kind of created this narrative in his head based off his emotions to almost confirm what he was feeling inside of himself, based on this fear of him losing the one he loved, right? But it turned into this almost like desire to be greater than the Jedi and to overthrow them, and then eventually overthrow the Chancellor, right? And I think that that's where it was kind of the beginning of the end for him, because if he kind of kept a clear vision that even if he was gonna kill Obi-Wan and then kill Palpatine or whatever, kept that in his vision instead of kind of losing his mind and then snapping and basically almost killing the one he loved in the effort of trying to save her, which then resulted in her death. He could have essentially killed Obi-Wan, then killed Palpatine, and ruled the galaxy with her or whatever, right? Like he was professing. So, but in essence, we know how that ended, but it's almost this aspect of killing the woman that he loved in the attempt of trying to save her, because he was not because he couldn't do that, but because he was driven to that by his fear. If he continued on the path that he was on before these emotions started to mess with him, and he still carried out that plan, he would have probably ended up overthrowing Palpatine and becoming Emperor, and then ruling the galaxy with her. But because he did it out of fear of losing her, it ended up resulting in him losing her. So he played into that aspect of the dark side, which was what Yoda was telling him. Fear of loss is a path to the dark side. Learn to let go. Train yourself to let go of that which you fear to lose. So, and basically he becomes this almost like psycho, and to a degree, I think Padmé almost like she liked that at some points in the storyline. Don't know if you can see, but when he tells her that, oh yeah, I killed all the sand people, that should have been like a yellow flag for all of this stuff coming. And even Palpatine brings that up after he kills Dooku. Remember what you told me about your mother and the sand people. So, it's almost this. That was like the thing that set the emotional turbulence in motion. This death of his mother, and obviously that aspect of MDLP here. So, and in essence, what I'm trying to get at is that deep emotional attachment is what leads to him losing everything. He's not saying that he can't have this type of relationship and still get kinky with his girl or whatever. It's saying that, yeah, you can do that, but you have to maintain your emotional balance and stability while engaging in that aspect of attachment, because if you don't, then you essentially lose yourself, which is what happened to him. And she even tells him this, that, I don't know you anymore. Come back, stop now, come back, I love you. But, at that point, he was so engulfed in his rage and so absorbed in that anger and that hate for the Jedi that it blinded him in all its aspects. So he wasn't hearing that shit at that point. He wasn't hearing that. So, and then as we know what happens after that. So, yeah, and I think that was really that aspect of fear coming in with those visions, and that same precognitive aspect of fear and almost internal blockage in the form of emotionality that was similar to what he was sensing when his mother died. That was the beginning of the end, because he let it get to him too much. Like Master Yoda said, learn to let go of that which you fear to lose, because it blinds your ability to see, it blinds your awareness to act clearly and act soundly, and by giving into those emotions, it ends up leading you to the path which you didn't want to go down. So that's why the Jedi exercise this aspect of detachment from those material aspects, right? What does Yoda tell Luke in the later episodes about Obi-Wan? Long have I watched over this one, watched as he looked away to the horizon, never his mind on where he was, what he was doing. Adventure, excitement. A Jedi craves not these things. And then he tells him, you are reckless, and basically says this to him because when you're always absorbed into, the grass is greener somewhere else, or, your mind wandering to what should be happening rather than being right where you are, being in the present, being mindful, which is what they essentially preach in things like all these meditative traditions of keeping the mind at stillness and whatever, which essentially is how you clear your mind of these attachments that are not beneficial for you, and why they exercise detachment and whatnot from the material world, because attachment leads to these feelings. Not in every case, but if you are not mindful, and if you surrender yourself to that, then that's what happens, right? So you have to be mindful. So this is really where it translates back into what we talk about of being mindful, being detached, being conscious, being aware, using your insight rather than your emotional reactions. So it's not saying you can't use your emotions, it's just saying you have to be mindful of when you use them, right? Remember, dark and light are both part of the Force. Everything is the Force. The only thing that just differentiates them from one another is the capacity and the intensity and the part of the spectrum in which they're used. One is fully engulfed in your emotions, and one is fully detached from your emotions, but in between you have a balance. So, and that's really the type of energy we saw, which allowed Anakin to defeat Dooku. He was tapping into both the dark and light side of the Force. He was telling him, you have fear, you have anger, but you don't use them. So, in essence, though, Anakin was down bad for some MDLB, and you can't really blame him. That's the essentially the hype of the 21st century at this point. So, he was down bad for some goth mommy trends or whatnot. And Padmé had that actual traditional what you would look for in a woman, where she was respectable. She had her priorities on being independent, on her duties of exercising herself independently, and having that aspect of responsibility to her. And Anakin even realizes this at some points, like in episode 2, before this whole turn to the dark side really took place, where when she falls out of the craft while they're on the way to confront Dooku in the hangar, he tells them, put the ship down, and Obi-Wan's like, we can't risk losing Dooku, and he's like, I need you to face Dooku, I can't do this alone, and he's like, put the ship down, and he's like, you will be expelled by the Jedi Order, and he's like, I don't care, or whatever. And then Obi-Wan's like, what would Padmé do? He's like, use your senses, what would Padmé do if she was in your position? And Anakin comes to his senses, and he's like, she would do her duty. So, but of course his emotions was still clouding him when he got to the hangar, and he charged in recklessly, and that led to him being electrocuted and tossed aside, right? So yeah, in essence though, point is that his emotions were clouding his judgment, and the story here as it relates to us in the 21st century, because Star Wars is making a comeback. Why is it making a comeback, especially the prequels? Because of this aspect. A lot of guys are absorbed into this type of dynamic in a relationship now, and nobody can blame them who doesn't like to get kinky, right? But the point is that you must maintain that state of emotional balance and emotional stability and emotional centeredness and mindfulness and awareness and insight and intuition, so you can use your sound judgment. Because a lot of times when you give into your emotions too much, you end up succumbing to that result in which you found not desirable, right? So focus on where you want to go and be mindful of those things. Don't give in to fear, don't give in to hatred, don't give in to your anger. Give in only to the stillness inside of yourself, so you can discern things around you using your feelings, right? What does Obi-Wan teach Luke when he's training him in A New Hope? He tells him, don't, your senses can deceive you, don't trust them. Reach out with your feelings, but it only works if you can keep a clear mind, right? So in essence, it doesn't mean don't ever tap into rage or emotions or anything like that. It just means be mindful of when you do, right? Like Luke taps into anger and his hate and his rage to defeat his father, to defeat Vader, but he doesn't kill him because he is mindful of that afterwards, right? He comes back to his balance, right? Because Obi-Wan and Yoda trained him well. They taught him to be mindful of those things. Don't be mindful of your feelings. And he exercises this. He tells Palpatine, I'll never turn to the dark side. I'm a Jedi like my father before me. And that is essentially what leads to him not turning to the dark side. Him giving into his emotions, him feeling them, which is what the Jedi traditionally preached against. But he uses them, but he lets it flow through him and he lets it go. This is the key point. It doesn't mean you can't feel deep things for people that you want to be in a dynamic with, or that which you're sexually attracted to, or whatever. It just means that feel it and let it go. Same with all your emotions. The reason why I'm preaching this is because a lot of guys these days are getting too absorbed into their sexual desires and letting it distract them from their inner sense of self. And now there's a whole culture going around about overcoming this and whatnot, using but out of ego instead of out of inner balance. And this is what I'm preaching here. I'm preaching balance. I'm not preaching, only care about yourself. Don't focus on women. Don't focus on that which you're sexually attracted to. I'm not preaching that. I'm preaching maintain balance within yourself so you can feel everything. Let it flow through you and let it go. So, in essence, that's what I have for you today. On the Sword of Mercury. And let me know if you enjoy these videos discussing stuff more in like film and pop culture and whatnot around these kind of concepts. Emotions can be powerful assets to whatever you're trying to achieve, but you must be mindful of them. It's like fire, you can use it to cook your food, but if it gets out of control, it can burn down the whole house, right? So be mindful of how you use fire. It said don't play with fire. I would say play with fire, but be mindful of how you play with fire. Everything in moderation, right? So feel those emotions, feel those attachments, let them go. And this is, I think, why, people like monks, gurus, yogis, they all detach themselves from the world and separate themselves from society. They go off somewhere, they meditate, and they detach themselves from the world and from society, and they can't part of society really or function like that anymore. And the reason why is because they don't feel their emotions. They detach themselves from them to let go, to achieve higher states of consciousness, to achieve enlightenment and detachment from the world. But in doing so, by tapping into those higher states of consciousness and neglecting the aspect of balance and unity, you're neglecting the dark side for the light, or the light side for the dark. In this case, the point is that you have to have a balance and unity between the two. They're all aspects of the force, but again, everything in balance, and everything in unity, right? So feel your emotions, utilize them, let them go, and maintain your mindfulness, maintain your awareness, maintain your insight. And reach out with your intuition, reach out with your feelings. So, and I would say that this is essentially what I have for you today on the Sword of Mercury. Remember to like and subscribe if you found this helpful in any way. I encourage you to follow me on Instagram at @top_sorcerer. Check out my other channel, Moonstruck, in the description below. I actually talked about the Force a little bit in a recent video, which I will be uploading probably in the coming weeks, because I have about 10 episodes right now on my draft folder for that channel. So I have a lot of stuff still to post, but in essence it will be a topic discussing the unified field and whatnot, or discuss waves, and I get into the Force and how all of this ties into that. So if you're interested in that, I recommend that you stay up to date with that channel or subscribe to it so you can know when that video comes out. Once again, like and subscribe. I really thank you guys so much, so much for watching. I love hearing your comments in the description. I think I'm gonna start doing some interactive stuff with you guys, like taking polls for like video concepts or content in the future, and maybe do some giveaways of some stuff that might help you guys on your spiritual journey. I have some little I guess tools, as you could say, or instruments, or the equivalent of what a lightsaber would be like to a Jedi. So something to assist you in your training. So yeah, once again, this is the Prince of Mercury, right here on the Sword of Mercury. And again, I encourage you to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching,